Okay, so my clock says it's 5:01. So why don't we call this meeting to order? Shall we start off with introductions, because we have some new faces, both new employees and people who have been unable to attend. So, I mean, I think that's probably the best thing to do. You want to start with you? We'll go
Sure,
this way?
okay.
Thanks.
So Ralph Miles, the town manager here in North Kingstown.
Jody Clark, Director of Curriculum.
Barbara Marr, Principal DMS.
Robert Case from the school committee.
Frank Pilati, interim superintendent.
Michael Waterman, Chief Operating Officer.
Bob Correnti, Director of School Facilities.
Dante Marinaro, Department of Public Works.
I'm Tom Bryady, I'm on the school committee as well.
I'm Jean Feeney, I'm the Secretary of the Plants and Grounds and also the minute keeper for the meeting.
Kendra Winnick, Assistant Director of Pupil Personnel.
Kim Page, Town Council.
Lisa Bowie, Member of the Committee.
Jack Pine, member of the committee.
Adam White, Department of Public Works.
Thank you, and really that was just a delay because my computer decided to install an update, so I'm pulling up the agenda right now, so to be transparent, that was a delay tactic as much as it
You have
was.
There you go.
Thank you. So our first order of business is to review the educational facility master plan recommendations and to make a recommendation to the school committee for their approval. So I'll provide some background and then we can open it up, or would you like to start?
You can, then I'll have a few comments. Why don't you just open up?
Sure. And I'm just gonna give the background of the educational facility master plan. So approximately, at this point, probably about 2 years ago, we began the process of an educational facility master plan. It was a year-long process. The services actually went out to bid, and Kelia Kentor was selected to conduct this educational facility master plan. It involved public engagement sessions, looking at data and information, meeting with different members of the community to get their input, and then doing in-depth reviews of the school. And I think everybody, I made available the master plan to everybody, so everybody should have received a copy. And then this is the report that, took about 12 months in the making, perhaps a little bit longer because there were some COVID delays in there as well. And this was finalized last June 30th. In the meantime, Kelia has actually taken a position at RIDE in the SBA, the School Building Authority. So we were fortunate to get this done just before she made that transition. But I also think that the knowledge that she portrayed in there, portrayed in this document, lends to some strong recommendations.
So with that, I'm gonna just put a little umbrella on the whole thing and say tonight, our goal is to have a discussion and then as a group, send over a recommendation to the school committee, as Mike has said. That is a very important recommendation because the school committee will then take that and move forward with the due diligence to get it for the council in a timely manner to hopefully we can have a bond question in November. What I'm gonna do is just act as just a member of the committee. I have a number of questions. I don't want to hog the whole conversation, but I'm wondering if some people may have the same kind of questions because I read this for the first time a few weeks ago, and I just have a bunch of questions that maybe you, Mike, historically can answer. I don't want to put you on the hot seat.
Sure.
Anything you can't answer, simple as that. And so, and maybe the group has these same questions, but, or I can just open it up and maybe their questions will equal mine. I mean, whatever you're comfortable with, really.
We have to start somewhere.
All right, sounds good. So, and most people in the room know that I have a concern over having one middle school. That's just my personal commentary. As parent, grandparent, town manager, I'm concerned about its prospect of getting passed, and I'm concerned about its effect on the education of our students because you eliminate a lot of service to half our population. So when I'm going through the book, I probably went through that with those glasses on. And as a result, I just got a couple of questions you may be able to answer, you may not. And know that this all stems from, for whatever reason, and I have to take partial blame, and I'm sure the school committee will as well. When this plan was put together, I wasn't involved in it at all. And again, I could have easily made myself involved. That wasn't where it was going through. The last plan I had was back in 2019, when the school committee made a presentation to the council, and at that point, they were going to build a new school at the Whitford Middle School site. And so that's the long-term school proposal on June 11th of 2019. So in my mind, whenever anybody was talking about the school committee, talking about a master plan, I always thought it was this master plan. So to read this, I'm obviously dramatically surprised, in a good way, I guess. But my concerns are that in the plan, it mentions that page 2 states that we should be creating a smaller learning environment. And it's ironic that we're creating a small learning environment, but we're building what may be the largest middle school in all of Rhode Island. Page 11 says that the community had concerns about bus travel if not centrally located, and the proposal we're talking today is not centrally located. The enrollment on page 3 shows that we would be increasing, which not only make us one of the largest middle schools in Rhode Island, but I know we're talking about an $80 million plan, but in reality, and I know the doctor and I have a couple of conversations, as with Mario, we're probably looking more at about $110 to $125 million plan because of the students being a larger population than what was originally intended, I think. Page 29, this really bothered me, so you may be able to help me, and I should know this. They call it Whitford Middle School, a historic building which must be preserved. I'm not aware of any historic significance, and I hope that whatever plan we come up with, that a demolition of the school is part of the plan. We just don't need another vacant building needing to be maintained by the town. So, do you know where that came from?
And I believe I've even said that to you, and somebody else has said, no, that's not a historic building, so I do not know where that's come
Okay.
from.
Adam, do you know if it,
I
no?
don't.
Okay, good, really good.
I've heard the conversation, but I don't know.
Okay, so obviously, I think that we'll need to get to the bottom of that at some point, because number one is, again, so what obviously, I've shown I've shown some reservations about having one big middle school. I wanna let you know that I will give my commentary today as a member of the committee, but if it's 10 to 1, 9 to 2, 8 to, whatever it may be, I'm going to support whatever the committee decides. But until we make that vote, I wanna let you know that I have a real concern. Now, I know time is of the essence, and so it really puts us between a rock and a hard place, but I just have a concern as to whether this plan is the plan that we want for the next 25 years of students in North Kingstown. So I'm showing that concern. The historic building, I think we need to get to the bottom of, because whatever plan we come up with, I hope a demolition of the middle school is part of the plan. And I can tell you that we, as a town, are looking at the potential of that site being a public safety complex if this question passes. Me personally, I'd love to be the site of middle school, but assuming we go with the option we have in front of us, we're looking at that. I can tell you that our research, and we may wanna do this before we go forward, our research in putting a public safety building tells us that when we need to do some borings in that land, because there's a history about what was actually used as fill in the front area of that parcel. So it wasn't exactly normal fill. So we may wanna do that, and I think that we have to talk about that as well. I'd like to talk about Davisville Academy at some point today, because we're looking to use that as a rec center potentially as well. So there's a lot of things that I'd like to see the building committee talk about, but my main concerns here today are that, I've been working off a plan that dates back to 2019 that was building a middle school at Whitford Middle, and I just want to show some hesitation that I'm concerned about one large middle school. And assuming we go forward with that anyway, I'm very concerned about the community's reaction to potential bus travel, and again, the southern part of the town feeling that they have to go all the way to the north part of the town, and so I'm just a little bit concerned about that. So those are my reservations with a couple of questions, and I don't know if that sets the tone, but please.
So I don't remember question 1 at this point.
Okay.
So I get, but I think the first thing I'd like to address is maybe the PowerPoint plan that you have
Yeah.
to your left.
You got it.
The 2019 plan.
Yes.
So I was not, and I'm not sure anybody at the table, was involved at that point.
That's the last that council or I heard of anything.
So what I'm fairly confident in saying is that this is the first time since I've been in the district, which is since 2012, that we've had an outside expert come in and do an in-depth plan. So, on the beginning of the slides, are there any indications as to who, like, is there an architect or anybody?
It was presented by then Dr. Auger, and I went through this, I did not see anything about any architects or anything. I have to think by the detail of this, they definitely utilized someone's assistance, I don't know who, because they not only talked about building a new middle school at Whitfield Middle School, but they talked about an entirely new, plan for our elementary schools as well. The preschool, what they're doing Fishing Cove, what they're doing Davisville Elementary, closing Forest Park, Hamilton, again, they went school by school, and they talked about enrollment, so someone had to
Did some
assist
level
with
of
this.
work, sure.
Yes, I don't know what.
Barbara, do you have any recollection?
I just I remember when they were talking about closing Forest Park. You know, I think that there was discussion, I think it was purely discussion. You know, and then we had a lot of parents, at Forest Park come together to say they wanted to preserve that neighborhood school, and then it kind of just disappeared.
So I recall a similar conversation happening during the COVID year, during the back to school in the fall of 2020. And it came across as closing Forest Park, but we weren't really looking to close Forest Park. We were looking at it as an area to house the distance learning teachers. So we were going to move the Forest Park students to another school, so we had a place for DL teachers to teach. That's the only, you're not possibly confusing that, are you?
I don't think so.
Okay, all
So I
right.
can't say one, I will get back to the question, but
Sure.
back to this, I can't say one thing, I'm looking at my notes here, so just to, I can probably explain what happened here, just by looking at the dates.
Okay.
I think we all can. June 11th, they go to the town council. December 16th, we met with Dr. Roger, and we were talking about, setting up a joint meeting in 2020 with the school committee. And then we all know what happened in 2020. So that kind of, COVID. So that may explain what happened here, but I'm just looking at my notes here.
And then that rolled into this educational facility master plan that we had conducted. Cause I wanna say this started during Zoom, Jody, do you remember exactly when this started? But I remember it all started through Zoom,
Okay.
which would tell me it was in that 2020, 2021 timeframe, and then wrapped up in June of 22.
So I guess my first question would be, when you read the facilities master plan, the first question for all of us, and the answer is, if we go forward with the option of a new middle school at Quidnesset, how do we answer the concerns within the facilities master plan of creating a small learning environment, the bus travel if not centrally located, and it creating one of the largest middle schools in all of Rhode Island?
So let's start, and those questions did come up to Kelia during one of our community engagement sessions. And the way she answered it is through the design of the building. You create, and Jody, feel free to hop in, cause I see you nodding. You create houses or areas where you've got your fifth graders. So I think one of the layouts she proposed was, you've got a school with two wings, you've got 5 and 6, if this was a 5 through 8, right, cause it's gonna vary, whether it's a 5 through 8 or a 6 through 8.
It seems like the most popular was 6 to 8 so I was looking at the survey, and a 5 to 8 didn't get much support at all.
So, and the caveat I would put on that is the number of people at the session was incredibly low. And you may see a lot of stickers on there, and I wanna introduce a couple people who have just come in. We have, Dr. Earl, who's the school committee chair, and Mr. Robert Mezzanotte, who is the next assistant superintendent here in North Kingstown, and is starting on April 3rd. He happened to be one of the parents at the engagement session, by chance, and that was a year ago. So, do you remember, were you given 10 sticker,
Yeah.
10? So each person in attendance, that, not counting myself or other employees, were given 10 stickers. So if you count up, there may be, there was less than 10 people there.
Oh, yeah, it was a handful of people.
So while that sampling size, it shows a strong lean towards 6 to 8 with a preschool, the 3 options were a second middle, having status quo, I think was the exact wording she used, 2 middle schools, a 5 to 8, and then a 6 to 8 with a preschool. However, the number of votes are a 10-to-1 ratio. So she wanted to, when she set it up, she wanted to give parents the option to say, well, I definitely don't want option C, but I'm okay with A and B, so I can split my votes. So it wasn't, so people didn't feel obligated to all in one, or, I really don't want option B. Option A is my favorite, so I'm gonna put 7 or 8 dots on option A, but if in case that loses, I'm gonna put 2 on option C. So, while it may seem overwhelming, it was an incredibly small sample size. I'm not sure it's a valid sample size. So going back to the actual question that was answered of, let me start with 5 through 8, because I started there, and then I'll go 6 through 8. So 5 to 8, she had a 5th grade floor, a 6th grade floor. Then you've got all your common areas, so your cafeteria, your gymnasium, your office areas, your library media center, your itinerant classes, so your music, your art, the non-core classes. And then on the other side of the building, you've got 7 and 8. So, and then she did another one with 5 to 6, where you had a 6th grade wing that branched out, a 7th grade wing, an 8th grade wing, that all kind of hubbed back to a central hub. And then there was a preschool that was built off of it, it's tough to tie all these conversations together, because what she was also trying to alleviate is, when you look at the enrollment summaries down the line, is overcrowding in our elementary schools. So one caveat that's placed on this is, whatever plan we as a group choose, A, B, or C, involves redistricting, because we have to balance out the load at our remaining schools. So to answer your question, how do you do a larger school but keep that intimate feeling? It's through the design. The design of a new building is far different from anything we have here in North Kingstown. When you see new schools, they are state of the art.
What was during those meetings, what was the thought process as to why one middle school instead of 2? Was it strictly
Is
cost?
it newer and fewer, or is that the incentive to get the?
And that's right, right, is newer and fewer.
Yeah.
So one less middle school, and then there's multiple buildings that could go after that, right? There are elementaries that could go, and that'll change your overhead overall, and the redistricting will be made easier.
And I think it was also looking at the age of both our middle schools, and the amount of money that has to go into a building that's already, what is Davisville, 1960-ish?
Yeah, it's right around there.
So we're working with a building that's, our newest middle school is 60 years old. Am I doing that math right on the spot? Our newest middle school is 60 years old. Our oldest middle school is 90 plus.
Yeah, 90 plus.
It's closing in on 100 years old. So rather than keep putting money into older, inefficient buildings that aren't state of the art, and creating a brand new state of the art middle school on one end of the town, and a not brand new middle school that's dated, you're creating an inequity. So that's where I think her focus was, newer and fewer for operational costs, and then equity across the district. Not to mention the operational savings of not having to, granted, it'll be one larger building, but it will be high efficiency.
Did they ever talk about the lack of opportunities for the students? So whether it's chess club or band or whatnot, you're obviously eliminating half of the student population, because
So-
you have one school now instead of 2.
So that did come up as a concern, and what she was able to point out, and it is true, is that especially here in North Kingstown, we have an incredibly strong recreation program. And that program has offerings for kids, I think generally up through the middle school age. I think they really start to dwindle once you get past that middle school age, but there are still, so while kids may not be able to wear the school jersey, they'd still be able to participate in a game or activity that they like or enjoy. So that was kind of her explanation when that had come up as an alternative. I feel like there was one more in there.
No, we just talked about, we talked about the question, but again, creating a small learning environment, the bus travel.
Yeah, okay, so,
Okay.
so,
And
yeah,
one of the
that,
goals is, actually, one of the goals of this back then was, this proposal was to address the fact that at this time in history, one of the greatest concerns of the parents were the early start times.
Yes.
And they thought this resolved that,
Mhm.
so, I'm not sure if this does that.
I'm not sure if it does either. That would have to be a time study.
Yeah.
I think the advantage, because in her recommendations, she put, if you went with single middle school, Quinessa is the ideal site based off of town-owned properties, heck, even properties that were even available that didn't have easements or some type of restrictions. She found Quid to be a space that we already own. It's approximately 25 acres.
28.
28 acres.
And
how-
where Wickford Middle School's 14, so you're talking half the size of property.
And what portion of that is wet? It's a minor.
Yeah, it was just a little small piece in one corner.
Corner, right.
Where some of the other properties she looked at were saturated in wetlands, so.
So I think the advantage that we may get off of that, transportation would be a problem, and we would have to think about that. But do we have the availability with Route 4 and 403 to try and create some express routes from the southern end of town? That was something we would need to do through a deeper transportation study, certainly. But that is a concern, because you're right, it's in that
The northern part of it.
northeastern.
Yeah, and it would be vice versa if we were building in the south, you have the
Yep.
same issue. So
Yep.
I'm not criticizing those in the south for saying, voting no, or those in the north if it was in the south. It's just a standard reaction of, oh my God, my child has to wake up earlier, and also what else call was the west, also the way, it's just gonna be a little longer than go right to Wickford Middle, so.
I'm sure if there was space in the central part of town, you know, that's where we would be looking. So one of our restrictions is where is the space? Where is there space? Talking way too much, so.
No, I mean, I guess I had the same, I was surprised as well. I was thinking Woodford site in my head, based on the meeting we had last month. And I was caught also where it said that we couldn't demolish the current Woodford Middle School because it's historical, which seems completely ridiculous, and you wouldn't wanna use that site. So, I mean, that seems like a pretty important point to clarify, because is it feasible to build this new middle school at Wickford if we can get rid of the existing facility, cause it makes much more space location-wise, but was there still just not enough space, I guess? I wasn't able to decipher that from the report. If
For
that
a
was-
single middle school or
Yes,
for?
single
for-
middle school at Wickford.
For a single middle school, and I believe she puts it somewhere in here, the space was it 18 acres, does anybody remember?
Thought it was 20.
20 acres, yeah, I know there was an ideal
Yeah,
acre
about
based
20.
off of the size of the building. So RIDE uses certain calculations, so, for a building over 750 students, they're looking at 160 square feet per student. So to make that simple, a thousand student, middle school would be 160,000 square feet. So I think when she started doing that, it was, I thought 18.
Maybe it's 18.
Mr. Case, I mean, I don't say that with large confidence, I
Yeah.
just remember it was greater than 15. I think the Wickford site was just too small, and also, based off the configuration, once you lay out a school, can you also lay out the supporting, facilities needed for,
I don't think there would have been field.
gym,
and-
right,
and a
gym,
parking space.
never mind the athletic facilities, which is why, again, once you go to Quid, you've got the ability to have a baseball field, a softball field, 2 soccer fields, basketball courts, I think there was some other type of court, I don't know, tennis.
Yeah, there's two soccer fields, some tennis courts, a basketball courts, a softball field, and a baseball field on this design.
And it's a somewhat regular dimension, that's rectangular.
Yep.
What would we do with Davisville? If I missed that when I read that. Oh, okay.
No, so if we went to one middle school,
Yes.
both the Wickford and Davisville sites, under her recommendation are available.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting. So, okay. So I know the town, just full disclosure, the town, I don't remember the council yet, the town would be interested in possibly using the Wickford Middle School site, as we are interested in using the Davisville Academy site as well. But we'll talk about that at some point. And then, do you know if they ever talked about putting the administrative offices in the middle school too, to save the rent that you have here?
It was not talked about, no.
Just be a good selling point for the public, is, we're saving rent, I'm thinking of different things to encourage people to vote yes.
And I know that, so part of the rush, everyone knows, is so that we can get this project done by the end of the year, so we can maximize our reimbursement. There are certain expenses that are reimbursable, certain expenses that are not reimbursable. Does anybody know or recall if you add an administrative office to a new building that you're building, can you incorporate those costs into, or does that get
I think
excluded out of?
I think it's as long as it's part of the school building
As
and
long
not a
as it's part.
separate location.
Yeah.
So that could be something that gets designed into the building.
You'd have to attach it to be qualified for the reimbursement.
Okay.
So that is, I would say that is a possibility.
Just a selling point,
Yep.
something to talk about.
Another question we have though, if we were to try to, if it was even possible to rebuild at Whitford, then we'd have to have swing space to move those students to another location, correct? I mean, or,
Yeah,
because they,
or you build in the front,
is there even enough room for that though?
with,
Yeah.
right, is there enough room, and then with the.
Then all
with
their
the ma-
playing fields go away, everything goes away in the meantime.
Well, what the manager also said about, having to do some type of, you know,
Right.
Ground testing.
Boring
Ground
and-
testing.
Yeah, so that's questionable.
What are the actual numbers we, at Davisville now and at Whitford now?
the actual enrollment, thank you. The actual enrollment right now at Wickford, I'm sorry, Davisville is 442, and Wickford is 356.
You're talking 800 students
I'm gonna,
roughly, and that's 6 to 8. Cause I know
That
they were
is-
talking at one time 5 to 8,
So
which
that
I
is a
thought
s-
was crazy.
correct, that's a 6 to 8 configuration. And I think, so we've spent a lot of time talking about middle school. I think one of the other things that doesn't get enough attention here, and if you look at our analytics report, so as we're going through this study, the flow analytics report, which is a pretty good chunk down towards the end, was an add-on that came later in the process. Because once Killy was going around, she was seeing how tight our elementary schools were. So we did this analytical study, or Flo did a demographic analysis, which involved reaching out to the town to see what were future development plans, what were housing complexes that were in the pipeline, and then they start projecting what our enrollment should be. So we're currently in a downward trend, but I know in the coming years, we're projected to start going the other way. And I'm pulling it up right now, because they did it with different scenarios. So, scenario one, and I'm on page, what page am I on? I'm on page 245 of 285, for those of you following along. Scenario one, which is if you were to keep your existing middle school configuration, in 2026, we would be estimated to be at 101.8% capacity, so we'd be over capacity at Fishing Cove and significantly over capacity at Forest Park by 119.6%. Based off of this analysis, in 2031, both Fishing Cove and Forest Park are right around the same percent. Sorry, Fishing Cove is at 114% over capacity, but you've got Stony Lane at 99.5%, the high school at 96.9%, and that's under the current 2 middle school. If you go to a 5 to 8 if you keep your current middle school, let me make sure. So if you
Next
keep,
one down,
if you
scenario
keep
three.
2 middle schools, and were to make them 5 to 8 middle schools, you relieve your elementary schools, but you would put Davisville and Wickford over capacity at 2026 by 105 and 106%. And that would be an estimated 714 kids at Davisville Middle School and 515 at Wickford Middle School. So again, you've brought your fifth graders up to middle school, but you're keeping two. But you've solved your overcrowding at the elementary school in 2026. In 2031, you start to have a capacity problem at Forest Park and at both middle schools. If we were to go with a single, and I'm on page 247 now, scenario 3, which is a single middle school, 6 to 8. Our 2026 capacity is just about 102% at Fishing Cove, 120% at Forest Park. Hamilton's at 95%. And
That's a single school.
a single middle school would have an
Would be over
enrollment of
100.
929 people.
Would already be over.
A single 5 to 8 middle school in 2026, you'd be looking at an enrollment of approximately 1,231 kids. And by 2031, 1,256 kids. So that's a single middle school, 5 to 8. The next scenario is a single middle school, 5 to 8, on the Quinnesset site with Quinnesset closing. So now in this scenario, we have one middle school at Quinnesset and the Quinnesset kids redistributed. You start running into capacity issues at Forest Park.
This must still be scenario 5, though, it's still two separate middle schools, because they're still listed
I'm
as
sorry,
separate.
you're right,
Yep.
you're right,
It
thank
must
you.
be scenario 6 combined.
You are correct, so I'm gonna, scenario 5 is keeping two middle schools,
And just closing quick.
5 to 8, and closing quick. Puts us over capacity by one student at Forest Park, and then puts us over capacity at Wickford and Davisville. So, and there's a few more scenarios, I feel like I'm losing people, cause I know there's a lot, if you're not following along, it's tough to follow. The purpose of this, is not just the middle school, but also looking at assisting the capacity issues at the elementary schools.
So Michael, are we looking at the three options, do nothing, new 5 to 8, new 6 to 8, and that we need to pick one of those to make a recommendation to the school
So,
committee?
if I could clarify, option 1, instead of doing nothing, would be building a new middle school, keeping two middle schools and building a new middle school. Replacing Wickford Middle.
Oh, I see.
So
So
scenario
GMS
1 is.
stays, Whitford gets a new middle school at the middle school.
Correct.
Oh, I see, okay,
Correct.
okay.
Scenario 1 is keeping two middle schools.
But only Whitford gets a new one.
Exactly.
I see, okay, thank
Exactly.
you.
Scenario, and I don't wanna label scenario 2, scenario 3, cause I don't remember
Yeah,
how they're
right.
laid out, but, the three scenarios are two middle schools, Wickford gets a new one, a 5 to 8 single middle school, or a 6 to 8 single middle school with a preschool addition, and certainly, we can look at, on any of the options, administrative offices.
So we need to make one of those specific recommendations.
So this
tonight.
committee, through discussion, comes up with a recommendation that we send to the school committee.
There's one other option, which I would think that probably none of us are for, but there is one other option, and that is that, we would like to revisit this. We don't like the three options in front of us, we want to introduce a fourth or a fifth option that we may think of as a group. But the downside to that is that we may lose the incentive points. Yeah.
Correct, I mean, we could come up with many options.
The only reason why we're in a rush is because we wanna get to 52 and a half.
Exactly, and a lot of legwork has been done.
Yes.
With some, this came in with, not let's build a new middle school, when the education facility master planner came in, it wasn't necessarily with a target of building a new middle school, it was look at our facilities, identify the need. She quickly identified that the middle school here between the age of Wickford, the size of the classrooms, I mean, you can paint Wickford's well kept, but you can't make the classrooms any bigger, you know, they're built for a different time. So she quickly identified the middle school as being a priority, but also realized as she started digging that capacity at the elementary school is also going to be impacted.
If I may, I think the other restriction is stage 2 has to be submitted by September 15th. The committee also needs to hire a project manager and a architect. And that individual has to take the one plan and then do all the work on the one plan to submit that by September 15th. And there's a lot of work involved with that, so there's a lot of tight timelines, if you will, to qualify for the incentive.
And just cause everyone here may not, so our district, North Kingstown, gets 35% state reimbursement. By the end of the year, if we have a project that is ready to go, we would qualify for an additional 17.5%. So it's a 50% bonus of what you receive. So, I mean, it's a lot of,
It's a heck of an incentive.
yes.
And just for clarification from the cheap seats back here, I think the charge from the school committee was to present either an option or rank order. So if the committee had two options they liked, but they liked this one first and this one second, it's not that you have to make one decision, but at least giving some guidance to the school committee on what people's thoughts were, I think, was the official motion.
I just wanted to make one observation, Ralph, you pointed out that, you know, you think you're gonna get some anxiety from people in the south part of the community, and I mean, that's valid. I'm sure there are people that are not gonna be happy about this. I'd only point out, as a resident of the northern part of the community, that for as long as I've been in North Kingstown, people from that portion of the state have bused south to the high school. And I think they've had a pretty good experience. I mean, nobody likes to take long bus rides, and it's Rhode Island, where nobody likes to go more than 5 miles at any one time, but, you know, I think we could explain that and sell it as a point that we understand your concern, but frankly, the investment is worth it, especially if we have the room in Cohasset to get this done, so.
So, and I don't disagree with any of that. I will say that, I guess my only concern is that when I take the 30,000 square foot view of the town, I almost look at the high school, Woodford Middle, as central. But I know where you're coming from, so, and I definitely know where you're coming from. And again, it's not, it could have been, no matter where you build it, unless you build it central, I think we could get that pushback.
I
I'm just concerned
agree
about
with you that the high school is not located on the border with Narragansett or South
Yeah.
Kingstown, or south of 138, but
It is.
it's pretty far south
Yes, it
for
is.
anybody who's up in the Davisville area, so.
Sure.
I don't know, I'm hoping that we can get past it, so.
Well, it seems like those kind of issues are gonna be decided by the voters. I mean,
Yeah.
we can say those things and have those opinions, but it isn't up to us to have to decide or not decide based on those issues. So, I guess, being an engineer, I'm a numbers person, so the option with the 5 to 8, which takes care of other problems that we aren't even thinking about, seems like the best approach, again, just purely black and white. But, I mean, again, the voters will decide. If they say, well, no, we don't want 5th graders in the middle school, that could tank the whole thing. So, you know, we have to think about that as well. So there's a lot to go on, and I don't know how we move forward here.
If you look at the projections, to me, it doesn't even make sense to try to stick with the 6th or 8 because the numbers are already, you know, and the one overage that we have could be fixed at the elementary with redistricting because we've got a building at 55% capacity and another one at 96, and that could be evened out if we withdrew, you know, reconfigured the borders.
So from an educational point of view, I wanna turn to those in education.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on a middle school that has 1,300 kids?
It is large. We looked at what the next largest, we thought it was Charahoe Middle School has around, what did we say, 900 and something.
Charahoe's a 5 to 8, I think the largest is Woonsocket.
So there are others out there. I mean, my history is coming from Portsmouth where we had it 1.4 through 8. in our middle school setting, and I was a fourth grade teacher that got moved to the middle school and was traumatized by the whole of it. However, I lived through it, and the way that building was configured, 7 and 8 were on one side, 4, 5, and 6 were on the other. The only thing they shared at different times was a library and a cafeteria, and otherwise they stayed on the busing, which we know tends to be an issue, but, you know, the younger students sat up front, the older sat in back, and we made it, we survived. We had separate administrators for each as well, and I think it can be done. You know, I look at our 2 middle schools, and I think it would be nice to have one to make consistency amongst programming and instruction, and to have all grade level teachers working together. Not that we're not doing that now and trying our best to coordinate that, but I think there are benefits of having them all together in the same. It is a large building, there's no way around that, and that's just where our numbers are right now, but.
And go ahead, and then I'd actually like to hear from Kendra, because I
Sure.
know from a
special education
ADA accessibility
Compliance.
standpoint, we have concerns at both buildings.
Makes sense.
And then both Warwick middle schools are in the 1,200 student range.
thank you.
So both, they have 2 middle schools running about 1,200 students. I looked it up, and I also talked to our athletic director, was the principal at Warwick Vets Middle School, so.
And I think building those teams or houses within the large school makes it into smaller schools within the larger school. So, and right now Davisville teams, Wickford doesn't, so it would give the opportunity for the Wickford kids to be on teams, which I think is the middle school philosophy.
So the 5 to 8 option really opens up more space in the elementary schools, and we have potential for more space in the middle school as well to create some alternative learning programs. So I know that you had mentioned potentially looking at Davisville Academy as a potential rec space in the
Yes.
future, which leaves 20 students with nowhere to go. So, you know, right now, I'm getting calls almost every day in the district with students in mental health crisis, and we need a placement that's therapeutic, and quite honestly, there's not enough seats out in these very expensive locations to send them. So those 20 students, we really need to find a way to build it in-house to keep them in our district, and then also create opportunities for students who are in crisis to have a therapeutic setting within their home school before they go to a more restrictive setting. So if we can free up some of the space in those elementary schools, we could create an elementary program, we could create a middle school program, that I think would really help to keep those kids in district, and create more opportunities for inclusion. Also, going back to the ADA compliance piece, Wickford Middle School, as you all know, is really not accessible for students, that are handicapped. Davisville Middle School is better, they do have an elevator, but it is quite a long process, so they have to go down to go back up, and it takes quite a bit of time, so they're taking away instructional learning time. They can only go 1 in the elevator at a time. If there was ever an emergency and they're on the 2nd floor, and we're gonna have to carry them on our backs. I'm not quite sure how we're gonna get them out. We need to have ramps, and different things, really more state of the art. And then if we had 2 separate middle schools, it would really create an inequity in my mind, where you have students that have this state of the art facility and students who are, you know.
And I know you touched upon it, but really keeping kids in the least restrictive environment, do you mind just speaking to that just a little bit more?
So, as you all know, so students are entitled for appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. So that means as much time in their general ed classroom with their non-disabled peers as possible. And when the only option for them right now, so if a principal calls and they have a student in crisis and they have nowhere to go within their building, because those programs aren't created, we don't have the staffing in the home schools. So then they call and they wanna get a placement at Davisville Academy. Well, we've had historically a really difficult time staffing that. So that's not always the option either. And it creates no opportunity for a step down, right? So if they're in a restrictive setting, a therapeutic setting, like a Davisville Academy or a Bradley, and we wanna bring them home, right? They just gotta go right back into the classroom setting. And so there's no step down. So an alternative learning academy is like a school within a school, where they can have those bridged opportunities to be included. So if they're really excel at math and STEM, right, we can get them maybe in those classes, but maybe they spend part of their day in the alternative learning program with those classes that are really problematic for them.
still, I'm gonna lean towards those in education. But I, as someone not in that field, I still have a concern over 1,200 student middle school, but, and I know you mentioned Warwick, and I'm not gonna blame the size of the middle school for Warwick's test grades, but if I wanna compare myself to Warwick, but I'm sure it's not because of the size of the middle school. But at the same time, if we're saying that the potential of a large middle school, that we would be able to relocate the students at Davisville Academy potentially within that complex?
Not necessarily within their complex, but, so our middle school program at Davisville could be housed in a middle school. So rather than if you have two separate middle schools, you'd have to have two programs.
But I'm saying Davisville Academy could be closed and the students could be relocated to programs within the new middle school or not?
So we want our kids educated in the least restrictive setting.
Yes.
Some of those kids at Davisville could potentially step down and be in their home schools, but right now there's nowhere for them to go.
Mhm.
It's all or nothing, right? They're either all in their inclusion classroom with some resource support, or they're at a restrictive setting,
Right.
which is segregated from their peers. So my idea really is to create an alternative learning program at the elementary level, middle school level, and the high school level, where those students could have their education, and then if that's not working, we could look at a more restrictive setting outside of district. But my hope would be that we could get those kids back in our home schools.
So I think you might be asking the question, so if I'm hearing you correctly, the kids that are currently at Davisville Academy would go to, if they're an elementary program, would go to an elementary program, they'd go to a middle school program and a high school program, and we would not occupy Davisville Academy.
Yeah, similarly to our life skills program, so we have some students that we do send out of district because they have really significant, mobility needs and really just very significant challenges that might go to a Pathways or some other program, but most of them we actually keep in-house. I know that we have a program at Davisville, middle school, we have a program, or two programs in the elementary level, and then we have one in the high school, so we're able to keep those kids integrated with their peers and have opportunities to be with non-disabled peers. It's also great for the general ed population to be mixed with them.
So we wouldn't be taking Davisville Academy, K-12, and putting it at the middle school?
Presenting to the school
Yeah.
system.
Correct.
Which,
have more space.
and you feel that's workable, and I only say that because, I'm well aware of the public safety response that we're constantly having to provide to Davisville Academy.
I think it's an individualized decision, so
Okay.
every one of those students would have to have an IEP meeting where we would decide as a team if that alternative learning setting is appropriate, or if we have to look at a more therapeutic setting.
Gotcha.
Right back to the buildings and occupancy, you talked about, certain dates, you're gonna hit occupancy levels here and there. If the single middle school came into play, whatever it is, what is happening with Davisville?
Davisville Middle School?
Yeah.
It,
I might have missed it, I apologize.
No, right now, there would be no plan there would be no plan for the Wickford site or the Davisville site if a single middle school, regardless of its configuration, was built at Quid.
So just to jump on that, so two concerns there, but I think, number one is, and I know you know this by state law, I guess, that once you vacate the school, the town now is like Wickford Ave. But also there's a big push from the state, for the towns to utilize these buildings for housing. Big push, matter of fact, I think it's actually a regulation, but I don't know for sure. We've talked internally, we may have a use for Wickford Middle School, provided that land is buildable on it, because we'd like to build while at the same time the school is there, but that's a whole other question. And in Davisville Academy, we think it's a great spot for a rec center, and my point is that this all could be a good selling point for the voters. In that, it's not just, we're not gonna have more vacant buildings, but Adam brings up a good point, we will have Davisville Middle Schools if it's vacant.
Well, right, so if you're looking at fewer and newer, I think we might have touched on it, we might have touched on it,
Yeah.
somebody might have touched on it at some point in time. If you're tearing down Quinessa, you're adding all of those kids to other schools, is there an opportunity to take out a couple of, I'm gonna use North End, and I am a North End guy, so nobody upset.
You did go to Quid, right?
I did go to Quid. If you take down Quid and you take down a couple of the other North End schools and move them to your Davisville setting.
You could certainly, that is certainly, you could look at either moving, reconfiguring, let's say Stony Lane and Forest Park and moving them to Quid. Or you could look at, because Davisville Middle School, let's say this takes 5 years, is now closer to 70 years old. You could look at building a new elementary school. I know in some communities that have been building over the past few years, it gets a little contagious once you see what a state-of-the-art school looks like. There could be a desire for us to look at, building a, start combining a few elementary schools into newer, I mean, I don't wanna put the cart before the horse here, but I mean, it could become contagious.
No, it could help your numbers as well, though,
Yep.
if you're taking down something,
Yep.
you need a place to kind of put people.
For instructional purposes, as I look at the open classroom settings that we have 3 buildings currently, and I was at Fishing Cove today, I mean, they do a wonderful job of managing it, kudos to them. But I look at it and wonder if there's better options in our elementary schools than the open classrooms.
Which Davisville schools do have your enclosed classrooms.
Yes, correct, they do.
Public safety law, never mind education, is that right? And I will say just one last thing, and this is not towards us, this is more towards the state, and I get frustrated. Yes, it is contagious, but regretfully, most of those communities that it's contagious, they get 90% reimbursed. So, it's really not, it's too bad, but regretfully, that's what it is.
I think you have potentially operational savings. Right now, we have, social workers, psychologists travel to different buildings, which takes time out of their schedule, and sometimes they have to hire an additional person to fill that gap because of the travel time. With those services being in one building, it cuts out all the travel time for all the special services, which could be a potential operational savings.
And I think there could be more robust tutoring programs and enrichment programs after school if they were located at one, rather than running 2 chess clubs into, I know sports-wise, it's less children on teams because you have one, basketball team and one, so there's a downside definitely, but when I think of programming after school, I think, we could enhance the resources only servicing one building.
And you could still offer intramurals.
Sure, of course.
In addition to the competitive rec programs, there are also intramural programs, that can be offered. There's no limit to somebody mentioned chess, there's no limit
Thanks
to.
for that,
to-
Yeah.
What we do in rec is we have, and again, we can talk about this in the future, we have an A and a B.
Yep.
So.
A JV, you can have
Exactly.
varsity and
JV too.
JV,
Exactly.
yeah,
Just to make sure that, students are still involved and, so,
absolutely.
whatever the activity is, maybe you can't have 2 bands, I don't know.
Or you just have a very
Bigger
large.
band. Yes.
Or you could have a 5th and 6th grade band and a 7th and 8th grade
Yeah.
band.
That's it, that is good.
I think the big sticking point is when it comes to the RIPCOA, which is the middle school equivalent to the Rhode Island Scholastic.
Yes.
RIPCOA is gonna say, if it's called North Kingstown Middle School, you have one entry into the team, there's no JV at this level.
Can't have 2 houses within one house.
It'd be
Exactly.
interesting to see what happens though with the newer and fewer model in Rhode Island, and if districts start putting pressure on that group to reconsider that, to give students opportunities, especially with all the wellness initiatives and trying to keep childhood obesity down and opportunities, people run systems could change if worked with, so, just a thought.
And definitely, we gotta fight for that. We may be one of the few communities that are fighting for it, as well as one of the larger middle schools in Rhode Island, but yes.
Yeah, I think you're gonna have more parents who will agree if they know that there's, one middle school, that both the north end and the south end are getting a new middle school. That if you do this and you're only replacing, Wickford Middle School, you're gonna have the same problem with, what about us in the north? Why aren't we getting the new middle school? We're, maybe not quite as old as Wickford Middle, but Davisville is not, was built in the 60s, so.
So, and I also, John, you and
Well, no matter what you do though, right now, both Woodford and Davisville need a lot of work. Right now, within a 5-year span, kind of what was the problem we had with the high school 25 years ago. It was gonna cost us $27 million to fix the high school, or $35 million to build a brand new high school.
So we've just gotten some draft numbers, and the number at Wickford Middle School is very high. I mean, we just at a meeting a couple months ago talked about a $3.2 million ventilation project that, I mean, Wickford Middle School, while it was built very strong, That's part of the reason why it's $3.2 million, we're 200 cores,
Yeah, penetration.
200 penetrations to.
Just to route ductwork from the roof down into classrooms.
So, in an effort to move the conversation, I think maybe we start, you know, I haven't heard, other than the manager, too much support for a 2 middle school system, but I don't wanna restrict anybody. Is there a desire for us to pursue a 2 middle school proposal?
The silence is deafening.
Yeah.
So are we in favor of moving forward with a single middle school? Just so I can get some kind of audible,
Yes.
Yeah.
okay. So now we start talking about, we've eliminated one option, and we have 2 options in front of us. A 5 to 8 middle school, as proposed in the facility master plan, or a 6 to 8 middle school with a preschool. Either option, I don't think we have to necessarily say we would move administrative spaces in there. I think that's something that could just be built into either plan.
That's
Well,
tough.
you wanna relieve the pressure at the elementary level. And at the same time, you wanna take advantage of the additional incentives. So you wanna kill 2 birds with 1 stone. If you move forward with 5 to 8, you're gonna relieve the pressure at the elementary schools going forward. You're not gonna have the opportunity for incentives going forward. You're gonna go back to the 36%. At some point, 5 years, 10 years down the road, you're probably gonna be looking for space at the elementary schools when you can solve that problem now and get the additional incentive. You know, it would make sense to look at 5 to 8, at this point, only because you need relief in the elementary school. And special needs.
I agree, that'll be then the selling point, you know, you have to convince people, because people, when they initially hear that their 5th grader will be going to a middle school, won't like that. So you have to then, when you bring this up, to really push that you're gonna keep the 5th graders separate from the other kids at the school, because other wise parents, that'll be their first thing that they talk about. And they will talk about the sports too, and that's not a small thing in North Kingstown. So it may be that you have to think about, how would you present that to parents too, you know, will you, and I don't have any, I'm not gonna make any suggestions, but you know, just how would you present it that you could still have, ample sports for students when you're going to 1 middle school? Cause I think that that is a valid concern, but I still support going to 1 middle school, and I think the 5th grade coming in there, you really have to make sure that that'll be, I like the idea, but you have to remember that from a PR standpoint. Cause having been on committees where bonds have failed in this town, you know, I was on the committee that was the last time for the Wickford Middle School and was supposed to be repaired, and it was a lot of things that we didn't address that then became rumors as to why people didn't vote for those bonds.
So I would love to, so how do we avoid that failure? I think you on this committee could be a real asset, to help us so that we don't fail.
Like I said, it really is getting out the message of what you want to do and how this will be better for the town and better for their kids, but yet not scaring the 5th grade parents. You know, so like I said, I think that the committee sounds like it's going in the good direction. It will be then, and that's not a conversation for today, to talk, because that'd be like a whole meeting plus some, and a subcommittee. But that's what you have to be thinking about, is just, great, if this is the plan we take, then how do we do that we sell this to parents, to make it sound like they're getting a better deal than what they have now?
And according to RIDE's numbers per student, for 12 or 1,300 student school, what are you forecasting? What, 135 million?
So it's a rate of $555 per square foot. So you take and I think this is where we need some help from RIDE, because I don't think RIDE is gonna necessarily, our enrollment study may be what RIDE needs to allow us to build a 1,200 student middle school when our current enrollment's only 800. So we'll have to figure out what metric we're able to use, but it's for a middle school over 750 students, it's 160 square feet per student, and then it's reimbursable at $555 per square foot.
So you're talking about $6 million if you went with 1,200 students.
Is that the 5 through 8 model?
Yeah,
Is that the
that's
1200?
what we said, right?
1200 is
let
5
me-
through 8?
I threw a 1,200 student number in there just because we were using that number. And it's roughly $106.5 million.
That's all inclusive, soft costs.
Yeah, and
essentials,
soft
all-
costs, yeah, but my only concern is you've mentioned knock down Wickford as part of it. I mean, that jumps this number up. We gotta knock Quid down. That's not, I don't believe in this 555 per square foot number. That's
Right.
you got a fresh site, let's build a building.
So
that-
probably looking at 120 million. I'm not throwing numbers out there.
Yeah, I don't know what the cost of knocking down and prepping the land at Quidnesset, but it's a big
So you
thing.
don't wanna go through, when you do the bond question, I think that's with the council, but you're not, but just let the committee know what the conversation's gonna be like. You don't wanna go through what Johnson's going through right now.
Yeah,
So you're gonna have a bond question not to exceed, you wanna want 120, 125 billion, because when the costs come in,
Right.
and you don't have authorization to buy, to spend the money, between a rock and a hard place, and right now, Johnson's, but I think in other communities too. where the costs come in higher than the bond.
And there are calculations for, furniture and fixtures is $210 per student. And then, all the IT related expenses, is 300? Yeah, I think when we were basing off of the thousands,
Thousand, yeah,
yeah, it's 300 per student that gets factored in that, and then there was a value based off of square footage for destruction costs.
But to those school committee members who are here, that's important too, and whatever help it can be, but just to make sure that we get a number that is at a maximum not to exceed. And then we as a town will run, a debt analysis on it to make sure that we're within our limits, and also to let the people know what the fiscal impact will be on the tax rate. So, those numbers are kind of important, but we get time for that.
And then, of course, what the reimbursement of 52.5%.
When we do the debt analysis, we do the 52.5%, and then we have to throw the public safety complex and rec center on it, which is separate from this group, and go from there.
But it really, when you look at it as a package deal, cause would you do one bond or would there be separate bonds?
That'll be up to the council. I thought about the pros and cons to both. Yeah, but again, I'd wanna know the school committee's opinion on that also, cause I wouldn't want, if we can do something to help passage of this bond, if you think having a rec center and public safety complex, and one bond question helps this, because those who want a public safety complex have to say yes to a school, then we'll consider that. If you think that, your public safety complex and rec center is probably not gonna pass, we don't want to be the anchor. We may disagree, but okay, then we'll keep them separate, so, we don't wanna do anything to adversely affect or impact of the schools, but I'll give my opinion on it, but, we wanna hear from the school committee as to, we don't wanna do something that adversely affects your goal to have a middle school. So,
And
we
then
can
from a
talk about that.
PR perspective,
That's what we did with the $27 million
Yeah.
bond. We met with the school department and we said, if you want a town hall, you have to have a field. If you want a field, you have to have a town hall, and the thing passed very well. And so, there's a lot to be said for that.
everybody gets something.
Exactly, there's a lot to be said for that, and then part of the selling point would be that the 52.5% reimbursement pays for the rec center and the public safety complex. And so there's so many different ways you can talk about this, but that's for another day. We can, whatever role I can play to help,
I think you raise a good point, how you sell it to the parents, particularly the fifth graders, and I think that's really important in terms of hiring the architect and how the building is designed and the services that are gonna be provided and how their children are gonna be safe in that building with seventh and eighth graders. And that would be up to the architect to present a plan to the school district, school committee, and or the building committee, and show the parents how there's gonna be a building that's going to be very safe for your children, and the services that will be provided, and the fact that it's gonna be new, is important. And that gets promoted out to every school. You bring that out to every school that's gonna be impacted by this, and you sit with the parents and you explain it to them, so they know right up front what it's gonna look like and how it's gonna be, serviced, and how safety is gonna be provided. Yeah, Bob?
Just a thought I had, one of the things you'll wanna probably look at is what other middle schools out there have this model, especially in towns that are similar size to ours, and what feedback you can get from them. What kind of challenges they face, pitfalls to avoid, things like that.
Yeah, and that's what the architect they have the experience because they deal with a lot of districts even outside of Rhode Island. They even have educational consultants that they work with in designing the building. So I think that's really important in terms of the cell.
I do think too, there's some opportunity that I've heard, and we can do more analysis on this depending on what direction you all go in. But I know start time has been a big concern in the district. All the research and data says that, you don't want the high schoolers as early, and we know we have staggered elementary school times, which is a huge challenge for after school care and things like that. And so I do believe that this plan helps with the busing as well. And so that's another option for folks in town to understand that like there's some opportunity for their kid, even if they miss the middle school and they're already at the high school, or even if their kid's 3, there could be some opportunities that would benefit all students in the district as far as busing and potential start time. So I think there's a lot of ways to look at it from a PR standpoint. And also with the 5th graders, as a mom of a tiny one that just went to a dance with 5th graders at it, with my 2nd grader, like I was like, oh, you all are ready to go the other way. So I think there's
Yeah.
benefits both sides for 5th graders to be in different spaces. They're a unique grade of human that I worry about my children becoming someday. But, so I think there's lots of ways to look at it and some cool opportunities, but really tying it into the learning and the opportunities for the amazing teachers. Like the people at Wickford Middle School and Davisville Middle School are doing phenomenal work. Imagine what they could do if they were in facilities that were actually modern. And I think that's the big sell and the big opportunity and the exciting part for our town, for all our students, so.
I know, Ralph, you asked a question about the educational piece. It would be a huge advantage to aligning the curriculum and having the teachers in the 5th, 6th grade working with the middle school teachers, 7th and 8th grade, and that cross collaboration taking place in one school is a huge advantage, instead of it being broken up as it currently is now, with this, that lack of communication, lack of connectedness.
I just have one question. Did you ever think of not Quidnessett, building at Davisville, all that land on the back, and then coming back forward, where you wouldn't have, I walked Quidnessett the other day, there's an awful lot of work, trees and where, I always wonder why Davisville wasn't a spot that I would've looked at and thought.
So I know she did look at it, I'm just trying to pull it up in here.
So probably something wrong
I
with it.
believe it may have been site size.
So much wetland there,
versus-
or-
I think that was one.
I know that's a problem
Site
around the
size?
high school, but.
Would you have to relocate those kids currently?
Relocate, that's, again, you run into the swing space issue.
Well, you build and then you come off the other way, same as the high school.
I think, I'm looking for, I think it was the site size that was most attractive about Quid, but the other, I mentioned this to Mr. Mallis, the potential opportunity of the Davisville Middle site too, with like McGinn and the skate park and different things, there could be potential long-term opportunities for the town there too, depending on kind of what direction things go. Also, especially being on that main road is nice, it's not kind of buried back in a neighborhood like Quid or Davisville Academy, so something for the town to think about as well.
So Davisville was 7.3 acres, so 10.4, I think it was size, 7.3, 3.1, and 2.2.
Okay, wasn't that where that land went to?
With a, what's that obstruction? This one doesn't have a key. There's something, Davisville Middle School sits on a 9+ acre site's relatively flat and somewhat restricted by flood zones and wetlands. The site includes car and bus parking, drop-off, McGinn Park. So, in looking at it, there's an indentation here, and I'll turn my screen around. The blue is the site, and then you've got this indentation. That must be the wetlands that she's
Yeah,
speaking of.
cause it looks like there's a lot of land there, and I always said that was like the most wide open land without having to, we were lucky at the high school that we didn't have to destroy anything. Really, at the end, you knocked down the building.
And that's, and part of that 3.1 acres is McGinn Park and then the baseball field. So.
Those are separate sites, right?
Yeah, so they are separate, and
Yep.
if you look at it, so this looks like it's one site,
Okay.
another site here, and then another site here.
Mike, just a question for y'all, consider something, and I've read the report a couple times, but I can't remember it exactly. I know for for pre-K in town, we have some opportunities for future things, and all the research really shows that getting students at that age in, is benefits for decades. And I know right now we have the lottery, and we have some limited hours and different things. So I didn't know if there was a benefit, or an opportunity, even if we do the 5 through 8, to enhance the pre-K program with both models. That's just something I think the building committee should think about, because I think that's another huge opportunity for the town.
And I think that played into the enrollment projections a bit
Yep.
as well. That's why it was either by pulling the pre-K out and putting it at a 6 to 8 middle school, you're freeing up a handful of classes at the elementary. But it wasn't enough to offset the capacity issues. So you're talking about expanding preschool. This may open up avenues to do so, but it may take reconfigurations of the buildings or an addition at some point.
So just to understand what you said, so if pre-K stayed at Fishing Cove, probably not an opportunity to expand, but if we potentially moved it to the new middle school in like its own wing, there could potentially be an opportunity to expand that program for
There
our
could be,
students?
yep.
Just, I wanted to make sure the building
You would
committee.
alleviate some, cause you would be
Yeah.
moving 5th grade out of Fishing Cove, which might free up some room. But again, you've got the open concept that the older grades are dealing
Yeah.
with, but Davisville Middle School always presents another opportunity down the line. But it would be nice to expand our pre-K program to
There's no
to house our own
that's something we
students.
could do, but I'm just making it water. I mean, it's something that could.
Cause the pre-K program now is a lottery system, right?
Correct.
Right. So this widens and gives more equitable opportunity to residents of the town.
And Kendra, to clarify, and I know you just started, so I feel bad putting you on the spot. Part of the reason that it's a lottery is because there has to be a balance between students with disabilities and students without.
It's an inclusion model, so there's students with IEPs.
Peer model
and
program.
Students with peer models.
And what we're recommending and voting on tonight does not address the elementary school issue at all, as far as the open classroom issue we have, we're not addressing that at all.
You'd be closing Quid, which is one of the open classroom
One of the
buildings.
open.
Okay.
There's
And
two
reducing,
remaining,
and reducing Fishing Cove potentially.
Stony Lane
and part of Fishing Cove, yeah.
and Fish Cove.
So reducing capacity and opening up some capacity at the elementary schools.
Yes.
So, but not the open space problems, yeah, my son goes to Stony Lane, I said, or both my sons go to Stony Lane, so I understand.
If you open up more space at Fishing Cove, right now, if you haven't been in Fishing Cove in a while, there's this massive room, kind of probably almost a little bit bigger than this, that's subdivided. And so I wasn't even aware that Fishing Cove was an open classroom setting, I thought it was just Stony and Quid, but when we toured, it's a difficult space in my opinion, and so what I was envisioning is if people were shifted around, there might be an opportunity to shut down maybe some of those, to get them into more contained classrooms, depending on what y'all do, and then obviously Quid is completely open for the majority of those classes, so it would help there a little bit.
And don't forget, like Ralph brought up the issue about taking this building and adding it on to either option is gonna take up space, on the site, and you're gonna have to consider, there's no option for 5 to 8 with the preschool. I think that was one of the options, right? The preschool is just with 6, 7, 8.
But you have Davisville Middle School, you have Davisville Academy, I don't think Whitford Middle School, but those two buildings are probably still renovatable, for lack of a better word, for either administration or potential like pre-K perhaps, long term, not in this plan. Maybe.
That's an idea to put the administration and the pre-K in one of the
Davisville Middle.
renovated buildings. Cause then you still reduce overhead costs.
Close Davisville Academy with, and, yeah, there's options.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to throw a monkey wrench into it, but it'd be great to have that as part of the same question.
Right. Yeah, no.
You know, I mean, again, I don't wanna create more confusion, but it'd be great to have something that's part of the same question, so we don't have to go to the voters again, and we get the 52.5%, but.
And one of the things that once we come up with a solution, once we come up with a building, Bob and I have a few other things, depending on the bonding capacity. We've got some roof issues what were, do you recall? I wanna say, looking at buildings that that would still be in play. So not Wakeford, not Quaid, not Davisville Middle, correct?
Yeah, and not, because that's a newer roof, it's only 6 years old.
Correct. And who's the other one doesn't need a roof, Quid?
Well, we'd be knocking
Oh,
Quinn
right,
down,
duh.
and then we talked about if
Sorry.
we would have merged other schools together in Davisville.
We have, in the draft capital improvement plan we have, over the next 5 years, they're anticipating $20 million in roofs. The high school alone.
I just put 5,000 into the high school in the last storm. Like, Quid was 4,000, it's just, the roofs are just so bad, other than Davisville, we're just throwing money at it, and money at it, and money at it, cause they're in that rough a shape.
So I don't wanna go down, like, let's come up with what we think it is, and then I was going to throw that as a, depending on because again, when you package this together, the $20 million cost for the roof is $10 million. Because we'd be able to get reimbursement. So that's where kind of packaging this with it together makes sense. The roofs have to be done either way, whether we talk about them now or 3 years from now. But 3 years from now, we're not getting the bonus, so, but I wanna go back to the middle school and not.
So are you
Yeah.
looking for a motion, I guess, to get this moving along?
I will certainly accept one.
I make a motion that we recommend the 5 through 8 configuration, one middle school to that school committee.
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion on that?
I have to be the words of doom, I apologize. Right now, your parents are expecting longer bus rides at grade 6. They just, think about it, you're all over the place, all of a sudden, we're sending these people to 2. So that could create a problem with somebody who's not quite ready for it yet. So, just my
When you
outlook.
see somebody, do you mean a child or a parent?
The parent.
Well, the parent, the child's not gonna really, they're not gonna get it until they're on the bus for that long.
Okay.
And it's not that much longer, I get it, we're.
It's not,
we're in North
and
Kingston.
I was thinking about that, I'm not sure if it is a busing issue more than a workforce issue. If I have to go to work now, I have to spend an extra half an hour or whatever, sending my kid or waiting for my kid or what, I don't know, I mean, I've seen cases where kids get back home and parents are not in the house. So I'm not sure how that affects parent issues with the bus.
Although if they're going to middle school, they probably would go earlier.
Right.
And
Right,
you could-
earlier
that'd be-
start time, but
yeah,
that thought of.
Fifth grader would be going earlier, and that might be a bonus.
Yep.
And realistically, you're not gonna get a shovel in the ground till 25, 26, so there's plenty of time to prepare parents.
True.
We're still in the discussion.
Discussion on the motion, so in your professional opinion, that we're gonna get a shovel in the ground until 25, 26? Really?
It's,
Wow.
Takes a while.
Yeah.
Takes a while to put the bids out there and get a project manager on board and, get an architect on board to draw out the plans and, meet Brian's timelines. They're not gonna approve the phase 2 until we give it to them by September 15th. And then depending upon when they meet, that may take you into the next year for final approval, and then the bids will have to go out at that point, and then your bond will go out in November.
November of 23.
yeah,
Well,
I-
I'd be
pushing to do it now.
23, so that's gotta get approved, and the ride process is just a little longer.
so, and I know when Mario was here, he and his team identified that they are well aware of, we're not the only municipality, trying to do this, so I know he was talking about doing some fast track for folks who are looking to be ready for.
And the next agenda might have, kind of addresses some of those concerns.
But just for the
We need to talk.
committee's, knowledge, and I wanna hear from the doctors, I appreciate that, is that shovel in the ground at 25, you're probably opening the middle school September 26th at best. Interesting.
A little bit of that.
September 27th, some guy says September 26th, that's, okay.
Any more discussion on the motion? So the motion is to, recommend to the school committee a single 5 to 8 middle school. You ready to vote? All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I believe that was unanimous. unanimous, did anybody abstain? So it was unanimous. Okay, so I know the next item, I hinted at it, is I had just identified that we have received the draft of our capital improvement plan for the next 5 years with our current one expiring in June. Thank you, Kendrick, very much. In the schools that we would still be occupying, we have approximately, it was 19 point change of estimated roof repairs. I don't know if this is, I mean, are we premature, I'll defer to you, Ralph. Are we premature to talk about, could we include that in a bond? Or are we just talking, like, would we do an add-on now, or would we do an add-on? This is new to me. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, not at all, not at all. I mean, you can talk about it now, sure. Again, you know, how the school committee wants to handle that is a whole nother question, but just gonna do a fiscal impact, and we have to do that, so.
And I guess the question is, can we even talk about it? It's not as called out agenda item.
Well, it is under other facilities updates.
Okay,
That's what I'm, that's my interpretation.
okay. I just wanna make sure
I think it is,
we're in
yes.
compliance.
In addition, I think it is, yes, because you also, it says review the master plan and make recommendations to the school committee. Doesn't mean the recommendations have to be in the master plan.
Okay.
You can still make recommendations over and above the master plan, instead of review this and then make recommendations. Just as if we made a recommendation to do 3 middle schools today. That's not in here, but we still have the right to do that, so I think you're okay.
So,
Just a fiscal question. The hiring of the architect and the cost for that, all of the finances will come from the town to support those positions versus the school department paying for the architect versus the town paying for the architectural services. You're gonna get reimbursed either way, but the reimbursement will come to the town. So is it wise just to have the town deal with all the financial pieces?
So if I understand the question, all of the expenses will come from the bond.
Correct.
So the bond will pay for the architect and everything. The bond, so we will accept, once we get authorization for the bond, yes, the town would then do all the financing, so we do bond anticipation notes. We
So
wouldn't
you
go
would
out
have to
for-
pay the architect up front.
Out of
and
the
then you-
bond,
Yes, so I
yes,
understand what,
and we get reimbursed, yes.
Yes.
We get reimbursed, and that's part of the housing aid. And so on the town budget, we have our debt service, which is mostly school department, and then we have our housing aid, which pays for the debt service. And so, yes, the town would determine how to finance that. And so, for example, if we get authorization for a $150 million bond, we have to do the analysis, but there's a good chance that we would probably do bond anticipation notes, because why pay the nut on a $150 million bond if you don't need that money until 2026, 2027, and then even that first year, maybe do interest only depending on the debt collection. So yes, we would analyze all that, figure out how to lessen the impact for the taxpayer, but all of the money will be spent from the town. Yes, I'm trying to, because it's funny, I'm questioning myself because on a $27 million bond, that's not how it was. The school committee authorized payments and we then paid from the bond. But the school committee authorized the payments for the 27, the 13.5 of the 27. So chances are the building committee would probably run the project, the school committee would okay the invoice, the town would pay the invoice from the bond, yes.
So, just to clarify, my question would be, we would have to hire the architect, obviously, before
Yes.
the bond piece. So the town would pay for the architectural services, and then you would reimburse yourself from the bond.
Not
Or you would
necessarily.
get reimbursed from the state.
I'm not sure if the town would do that, so if you're referring to this architect here, the architect once the bond gets approved.
No, we would have to hire an architect
Now,
now,
that would come from the school
come up with
department.
the plans.
That would come from the school department budget, so I would say that would come from capital, or some unrestricted account that you have. That wouldn't come from the town, that's how I'm looking at that.
And we would get reimbursed.
You would get reimbursed, so assuming that so what happens there is that if you're making a capital expenditure, the town would get the reimbursement, but the council then votes to send it over to you. And then you put that back in capital, we've been
That's
doing that for the
what
past
I'm
6 years, yes. So,
School
which you'd get reimbursement on, or which the town, through the council, would give the reimbursement back to put right back into capital.
No.
I think, Ralph, that's how it's been done before.
Yes.
Yeah, that, as I remember it, you know, the school committee had to basically pay for the architect, and then it was the sort of thing, once we got the reimbursement. And if, so when we did the Wickford bond that didn't go through, yeah, the school committee had to pay for all those plans, and then the school committee ate the, you know, they ate the fund that, because the plan didn't go through, it wasn't the town that
Right.
paid for it.
Same thing on the public safety complex and the rec center, not to confuse it, so we're gonna, we refund the money, if it doesn't get passed, it's money poorly spent.
And I guess two questions, one, do we know, would we be, if it was not to go through, I would imagine we'd be reimbursed at the 35% rate versus the 52.5%
That's a good point,
rate?
that's a good point.
And then, is there an opportunity, not knowing the cost, is there an opportunity to get paid back from the bond? But I'm not sure that even makes sense.
No, that does make sense. So that I need to talk to bond counsel, but I think the answer to the second question is yes.
Okay.
Because it was a bond expense, it was a project expense, so I think the answer is yes, but that's bond counsel,
So-
and I can get
so
that
when the school committee puts out the bid, or the building committee puts out the bid,
for this.
yes,
Yes, because the second one come out of bond.
we would add that cost into the bond.
I will talk to bond counsel, but I'm very confident the answer is yes.
Cause that, yeah, that
Well,
would
how
be
much
the
do
only
you
way
think this would be?
An architect,
But this is only for the original recommendations, the second architect would be, you're gonna do this twice, right?
yeah, we're gonna.
I think we need to jump to this next
Yeah.
agenda item
Yeah.
to kinda clear the air of
Because the
what
way
we're
we've
up
done it,
against.
and again, please, it doesn't have.
Wanna make sure the mechanics are right on
Yes,
this.
so the way we've done it in the past is we'll hire an architect, to do the initial drawings, do the initial work so that we can, we can put the question on the ballot, have renderings for the voters, that's a very small number. Then once the project is approved by the voters, then you go out to bid for a full architect, which is normally, and help me out, probably 8 to 10% of the project. And so this is minor, this is a minor cost. But yeah, the second architect would be in the range of, you know, $10 to $12.5 million. I'm assuming it's 8 to 10, am I correct?
Yeah.
But this will be a small portion of that. So, for example, and I'm trying to think of the town hall architect maybe cost us $600,000, but the original plans was probably
About 5.
40, what is it?
I think that was about
What's that?
500.
500,000, right?
Yeah,
But then,
it's about that
but the
much.
original plans, when we just brought them on, I think we had it done for like 40, 50,000. You know, again, don't hold me to it, but my point is, it's a small portion of it.
You could
This should
also,
be.
yeah, you could also, it might be easier to hire a project manager or an OPM, and then they'll take over the whole project, they'll hire the architect and go through that whole bidding process.
You know what else again, you would know, so
It's
I'll
easy
defer to
for
you,
you.
the other thing you can do is when you go out to bid, and Adam can jump in too, you go out to bid for an architect for both jobs now. Because my point is that if I'm an architect, I'm gonna be motivated to give you a reasonable number for the original rendering, if I know that if it passes, I'm getting
Get the
10,
job.
12.5 million. So
And
I
I-
said, absolutely.
And this is
That's
the
what I would do.
perfect segue into what Bob
So,
wants.
so the next agenda item is just that, this RFP, RFQ, process that Mike has been talking about. So in talking timeline, and I understand where Dr. Plotter's coming from, and where you're coming from with, hire an architect and how to, we don't have the time. We might be able to hire an architect to do some rendering drawings for us from now until September 15th, include that in our stage 2. But in order to, think about it, we're gonna build a 160,000 square foot building, you're not gonna design it in 8 months. There's no possible way. So we gotta think about, we're gonna have to design build, which Lincoln's doing it with their, facility now, Providence is doing schools with it. I talked to Mario, that's how everybody that's in this crunch is doing it.
They have to, because if it doesn't pass.
There's no,
they pay them.
right, there's no way to make it to December
Exactly.
31st without going design build.
Exactly.
So Mike and I have, like, Larry sent me a document from, Lincoln today to help us kinda get an RFP together for a design build. I think that's the only way possible to get us to a contract with a design build company. That means they're gonna charge you to build. And Mario said by December 31st, we had to have a contract to build the building.
Yes.
So if we do design build, they have design and build, so we're under contract with them, we're good.
We get reimbursement.
So I think we need to talk about, we're using Rouse right now to get a stage 2 done, right? Stage 2 is gonna include a new middle school. Can he handle a rendering of a middle school? I don't know. I think an RFQ for architects just to do that part of the process, I'm glad you brought that up, because we haven't even talked about that, would give us a better idea of what we wanna build to get us to September 15th, and in that process, hiring the design build. I just don't know, do you do just right now, go out for design build and start that process, cause we really need a conceptual drawing.
In reality, you can, you still need a building design. You may not have, a building design to be constructed, but you still need to have a schematic of what you are looking to do.
And that's what I'm talking about, a design build firm is gonna happen, they're gonna work with us for the design portion, but then they automatically get the build portion. So we're gonna have a year, let's call it a year, just for rough numbers, to design this middle school. And we're gonna use that same company, and the bills will come in, let's call it Gilbane, cause they're doing all the big projects. They're gonna do all the design, then they're gonna do all the build. We're not gonna have time to go out and have a whole full design, and then go out to bid, and let 6 contractors bid on it, we don't have that time frame. So now we have to do design build, because you gotta get it on the docket, for December 31st, we have to have a contractor signed on with a contract. So,
With a contractor?
yes, that was Mario's one thing he said, we had to be under contract to build this school before December 31st, or we lose the 17.5%. And so I talked to him twice or 3 times this week, to Mario directly, and he said everybody that's in this crunch is design building, cause it's the only way to get it done.
A couple of the towns are, and us included, are working with, like, trying to advocate to the General Assembly to extend it to June 30th. Whether or not that's gonna happen is gonna be up to the General Assembly, but there is a cohort of different school boards looking at, trying to advocate for that right now too.
But
So
right
a
now,
couple
we-
things are happening at once, but we've gotta stay on target.
Yeah,
with
we
that,
gotta
but-
plan for the worst, right? We
Yeah,
gotta
of
plan for
course.
the 31st, and if we get that reprieve,
Yeah.
great, but, and design build has been done for years. It's just, is it the most optimal way? No, it's not, but for what, the time crunch and the 17.5%, it's the only way we can get it done. So I think that's, Mike and I have been talking, we actually started out with an RFQ for architects. And then I started talking to him about timeframes and talking to Mario, and we don't have the timeframe. So now we're RFP to design build a middle school. And so I have an RFP kind of put together from what I like to call R&D, rip off and duplicate from Larry up in Lincoln. And I've been kind of manipulating that. He sent it to me at 3. So I've gone through the whole document and changed everything to NKSD, and, and Mike and I are gonna continue to work on that. But we need to make a decision, right? I don't know that we need to make a decision. I think the decision's kind of made for us. We have to do design build in order to hit that December 31st date. Could we hire an architect now to do the preliminaries to get us through schematic through stage 2? So the pretty building on paper, site plans, all of that, sure we could.
And we have an architect already who was awarded by the school committee last year
The
to
stage
do
2.
a stage 2. Now, it did not involve the
The middle
schematics for a middle school, so, I'm sure there'd be a change order.
Right, we just have to put pressure on him and make sure he can handle that add
Correct.
to this project by September 15th.
Correct.
Because that's the key, is that we need some sort of schematic design. It's not gonna show every classroom and every little detail, but it's gonna show the building, the site, maybe a basic classroom or a couple of basic classrooms. A very, very basic, not for construction set of designs. And then that would give us a scope of work for our design build firm, per se. Like, this is what we want, and now they get to design the insides and all the rest of it. The site-specific stuff.
So that was my question, you don't just bring on a design build firm to develop design and then give you a cost, they have to have something to give you a cost from, cause that's what you're bringing them on to do, right? And then they design and build it for the cost that they told you they were gonna do it for.
So the document I took from Lincoln, they just gave and granted, it's not a middle school, so it's very vague, it's just basic information on building their sports center, it's an indoor building.
Looking good.
Yeah, so we'd have to have a lot of verbiage if we didn't have this schematic design. And so this is literally, in the last 2 days, Mike and I have come up with all this, we've been cramming. So yeah, I think there's a definite need.
Oh.
Definite need for,
Good save.
a schematic design, you know, a pretty building on a piece of paper, so the voters can see that, absolutely. So I think, back to Mike and I think we need to do an RFP and an RFQ. Or we need to talk to Rouse and say, can you handle this schematic design of a 160,000 square foot middle school?
And would the design build then contractor use that schematic design to?
That would be their template right,
Put their costs together.
correct,
Yeah, so we definitely we need somebody to come on board and do the schematic design.
right, and it's, whether it's Rouse or not Rouse, Mike and I need to figure that out.
So, just thinking of the specifications that went into the reconstruction of the town hall, that's a lot.
But that'd be in the design process with the design build firm. The beginning stages, the schematic design will just be, here's the footprint, here's the piece of property, we want tennis courts, basketball courts, we want this middle school size building, it's 160,000 square feet, it's gonna have 1,200 students, whatever, they'll have all of that data, plus some pretty pictures drawn, elevation showing what the building looks like, what the parking lot looks like on a site plan.
A RIDE sets that a middle school of 750 or more must have classrooms of 950 square feet, science labs of 1,200 square feet, gymnasiums of 6,150 square feet. So there's some level of specificity. I think I said that right.
Specific.
Yeah, thank you. There are known
Sure. Parameters.
Everything is
parameters, right?
guideline is what you need to.
And the companies that are gonna be design build, bidding on this project are building schools and have built schools, like that's what they do. A local, Aalborg's not gonna bid on building us a middle school, they may try,
They're
but,
gonna partner with somebody.
yeah,
But more importantly, I had a very wonderful experience with DPVW. They were our eyes on site.
Mhm.
Not 100% of the time, but they were there making sure that what was specified was actually installed in the building.
Mhm.
Keeping an eye on the contractor, making sure they
Yeah.
follow through. Who does that if you have a design build?
So we would hire an outside, the Colliers or the company you just referred to, we would go out to bid for that part of the for the OPM process. And we would need to do that now, because part of the design process at RIDE, you have to have an OPM involved from the beginning. So even like at the high school, when we did the HVAC, they had to be involved through the whole design process. So we would have a third party that works directly for us,
Yep.
whoever that company is, be our OPM and be involved from start to
I
finish.
think that's any project, $1 million or $1.5 million.
Yeah, that's a low number, but.
Is it uncommon to, and I don't know about that part of all of this, is it uncommon to have that firm put together the specifications to allow somebody else to build? No.
No, they,
So they're gonna look at what's submitted.
right, they're gonna
review
work
it all,
with
make sure it makes sense.
they would work with both architects, right? So they would work with our initial architect who's gonna do our, call it schematic design for the middle school and the property. And then after that transitions to a design build firm to truly do construction documentation. They would work with their design people through the whole process as well.
The sooner you do that, the better, because all these companies are putting in
Yeah.
bids to all these other school
Sure.
districts. It's gonna be limited.
He said there were like 13 other towns
Yeah,
that were in
there
this,
were a number.
it's like a number of other, some of them are actually holding their votes early before they
Right.
get some of this information and trying to get their residents to go ahead and pass this early, cause they don't wanna be against the same time crunch we're gonna be waiting till November. They're trying to get ahead of us in the race, it's a race,
I'm
basically.
not sure, I don't know what so I think,
So I guess the question is, what is the next step? Is it an OPM? Is it an
I would think,
architect?
yeah, if Jim Partridge already has stage 2, why don't we talk about, no motion necessary, he's already contracted for that. Talk to him about the overcost for the change order for schematic design for a middle school. We go out to bid for a OPM.
Sounds like you're making a motion right now, so maybe we should put this in.
I didn't even know if I was like a voting member, it's changed 3 times since I've been in the district, so I don't know.
Make the motion, nobody's gonna complain.
Alright, so I'd like to make a motion that we work with Jim Partridge at Rouse architects on the stage 2 schematic design for the middle school. Then
And we're making this recommendation to the school committee.
to the school committee. And then go out to bid for, an OPM to manage the entire process from today going forward until the middle school is completed.
Second,
Discussion.
how long do we think this process will be to find these people?
An OPM?
Yeah.
If we put it in the paper next week, they're only gonna have a couple of weeks worth of time to put a bid together. Because they're gonna show us hourly rates, basic charges, like, we'll tell them some meetings, and it's not a big ask. I have a bunch of templates from when Mary was here doing it, she's done it a bunch of times, so I'm sure we can put something together quick and turn it around within, I'd say within the month of March.
Just a quick comment, so the people who put in the bid will come before the building committee or the school committee?
So when the bids
For
come,
approval.
for OPM, typically the bids would come to Mike and I at our office, we'd review the bids, and then we would recommend to either the building, I don't know how you do it here, but either the building committee or the school committee. I've always done it to the school committee because
I think the policy, and I'm not an expert on this one, I think it comes to this group.
Comes to
So you
building
all would
first.
receive it, I think the building committee looks
And
at
then
it, they make
we
a
recommend
recommendation
it.
to the school committee and we approve it, I think,
I think
don't
you're
quote
right
me
as
on
well.
it.
No,
Okay,
you're
so-
correct, you're correct.
I think, yeah.
So that would be it, we'd get the proposals from the OPM companies and come to building committee with them.
Make a recommendation to the
Right.
building committee.
Question, they've done fine work there for everything they've done for us, but do you think they're the right company to do this schematic design? Can they put together a schematic design that a design build company can give us a good bid with? I don't know, I'm not being judgmental.
No, and I
but
truly
just-
get it,
should
and
we
that's
look
why I
at
keep,
other-
Mike and I were in the process of going out to RFQ because we have concern, just in timing, like, I don't think they're big enough to design a middle school. Could they do the schematic design? I think we need to have a conversation and a clear conversation, because it's a lot of work.
Yes.
It's a heavy lift for them by September 15th to do the balance of stage 2 with the schematic designs
Okay.
of a middle school. Although our stage 2 isn't gonna have a lot of other work in it, that's gonna need to be schematically designed, because we're not gonna have the budget for it. We're gonna have some, right, we're gonna figure in the 500,000 a year or whatever it is for capital. So it's not, I don't think, it's a giant lift to put it all together, but I am nervous. So I would like to talk to Jim and Dareth and have a conversation about, do they think they can handle it?
So is your motion to just talk to them or to hire them?
Well,
I'm
they're
not sure we
already
have that.
hired for stage 2, so like they're contracted to do stage 2.
Right.
We just never talked about a middle school
Okay.
in stage 2. I think we're obligated, am I wrong in saying that, to them?
So-
Because they're under contract?
If I may say something, I think the most important thing when you talk to James is to find out if he has the personnel to handle
Right, that's what I was
all
saying.
that stuff. Because I work with firms with 50 people doing schools of the size of this nature, so, you need a lot of people involved in that, even when
Absolutely.
it's just blocks and names and where the distribution, where the functionality goes.
Jeannie, did you happen to capture the motion?
I did.
You
Bob
wanna read
made
it
the
back?
motion to, go to talk to Rouse in reference to stage 2 schematics, because they were under contract previously. Go to bid for an OPM to manage the project, and, Robert Case seconded the motion.
So I don't hear that as necessarily awarding it to Rouse, it's
It's
find out if they.
discussing it.
Doing
Yeah.
research to
Okay.
see if they can handle the capacity of work we're gonna throw at them.
And then
Yes.
bring those findings back to this building committee.
And if they can't handle it, then we're gonna need to go our RFQ.
Should that
For
be,
other firms.
should that be, Ralph, stop me if I'm misspeaking here. Should that be a further motion, that if it does not work out with Rouse, that you make the motion, somebody somehow word it, so that you should go out for RFQ? That way it's settled here?
I would think that we would still need to bring the RFQ back here to get this committee's approval, and then bring it to the school committee.
Well, we have a motion to you too of what we need back, so, cause we made a very specific request regarding what we need today from you all, so I'm trying to recall what that was.
My fear is you're gonna get hung
Yeah,
up.
I think you wanna put some if
Timing.
then
If then.
things in so that you can move things forward to us without having to come back and reconvene I agree with them.
So,
I don't need,
in
I don't
the
need
original proposal that went out to this
Rouse.
Rouse, is what we're talking about incorporated in that original proposal?
No.
Has it?
So you have to amend that?
If
Is
they're
there
capable.
language in that proposal to amend it?
I believe that I've seen change orders from Rouse before, so I believe there may be, but I'm not comfortable
I
saying
just
this.
don't want
I am not
comfortable
sure
saying
the amount
that.
of,
Yeah,
the
we
amount
just
of,
gave it
to him.
that change order is,
Not
was
comfortable.
probably questioning him if it would
No,
be
the full
allowed.
schematic, that shouldn't be terrible.
And I would imagine that change order would have to come back here for
No,
approval,
no, it's fine.
and then to the
Yeah,
school
but
committee.
but I guess the question is, it is within the allowable limits, am I saying this correctly?
Yes.
Because when you are talking, even on the schematic side of it, and just to put a number, $150 million school on the schematic design, it could even be $1 million or $2 million for that.
Right, so what's the change order capacity for Rouse?
Right. Versus an RFQ for an architect.
Right.
You think it could be that high?
May
Schematics, I don't know. Schematic design.
Would it be such a bad idea to just put the RFQ out there
They can bid on it.
and do schematic, phase one schematic, phase two, whatever? Because the design build issue, I've done that stuff, it comes along, you need you need somebody like Jasper say, Gilbane, that it will coordinate and it will check every single note, theoretically should, every single note and detail. That is done by nature of the design build process. The question is, I think that you should just put the RFP or RFQ and get it over with.
For an architect,
both,
for schematic
yeah.
design.
I think so, because you will spend a month or two doing that, and you already have a month or two under your belt. You don't need to spend another month or two debating who goes and who doesn't.
If you do that though, put timeframes to it, so somebody doesn't start dragging their feet. And they shouldn't bid on it if they can't meet their timelines.
That's correct, that's.
It's a thought.
So it's,
Table that motion.
Withdraw.
I'm just not sure what to do now. So,
Just withdraw the motion.
I'm gonna withdraw my motion.
Okay.
So-
Is there a new motion?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I propose it. I think that we should do the RFQ for the whole project.
For
and go
design
from-
build.
And divide it into phase one and phase two,
On the design build.
and the design build. Phase one would be the schematic, phase two would be the design build.
But we can't hire the architect.
Hold on, we have a motion,
Need a second.
we need a second, then we can discuss.
Sorry. Somebody can second just for discussion.
For purposes of discussion,
Second
yeah.
for first discussion.
So we can't hire an architect to do the design for the design build firm. We can only hire an architect to do the schematic designs to get us to stage two. After that, we're hiring a design build company. They're gonna do the design and the build. So we're not gonna have an architect do the design, because if we do, we'll never make December 31st.
So-
That was the whole purpose of going design build.
So further discussion, build on that using tasks and hire your architect and your contractor right now.
Yeah.
But go through tasks, noting somewhere in the paperwork that if this fails bond,
It's done.
it's done,
It's
it's
over.
over.
Sounds great, I've never done that, so I don't know where to get that experience or where to get the documentation to set it up. We'd have to hire a company to put something like that together, like a Colliers or one of these OPM companies. And I did start that conversation with Colliers today, because we learned from another town, they were using Colliers to write RFPs, RFQs, and do all this work.
So you understand how big that document is?
Oh, no, I get it, but
And legal.
we're kinda stuck between two things, right? We're trying to find somebody to throw together a schematic for us, but then we're gonna find somebody else to do this. If you start with one firm with your schematic, they've already got the basis for the rest of the project.
How-
So
So how do we hire a contractor?
the contractor would come with a design build RFP we would jump into, I guess.
So we do an RFP, yeah,
That just got real confusing, cause you said to me, hire your architect and your contractor right now.
Right now, because you have a design build, you can't do design build without both of them. Put it out on the street as this is what you're looking to do with these tasks, right? Schematic, then design, I guess, schematic, design, all the way through.
All design build means is that you have a schematic, and instead of going through the process of developing that schematic through drafting, you just do it on the go. That is the only difference.
So what's?
You still are gonna need, my understanding is that you are still gonna need the architect to do all that stuff with
But the design build firm
management, with a
supplies
manager
those
firm
design
to
build.
do coordinate and, let's say, administer the construction of the building. You still need the architect, that's why I was saying that maybe the idea of doing phase one, if it falls, phase two, you go through the construction documents via design build,
so phase one
would be the schematic.
would be the schematic, and that would help us to our stage two, which is a ride stage. But if the bond, pick a date, November 10th was the bond vote, and if the bond were to pass, do we have enough time to do the architecture and do the construction documents to have a signed contract by the 31st?
It goes hand to hand.
Okay.
In other words, if you tomorrow build that wall and you need a door, I will do today the detail for you to build that wall tomorrow. That is the way it was done, at least when I worked on it. But that is the way that pretty much design build works. The details are worked on the go.
But is that the $10 million or 8 to 10%
Oh, yeah,
architecture fee?
it could still be the same kind of fee, because you still need the architectural firm to do that stuff with the Gilbane. I'm gonna put a name. Gilbane is not gonna do construction documents, or it's not gonna do any, it's gonna coordinate the architect with all the other different, fields, and it's gonna coordinate the on-site construction. And there is where it's gonna work with the contract. That is a constant, and it's not just a once a week, it's a constant, this is what we do, a daily basis, this is what we do, that's why you need a PM.
So how did Lincoln put theirs out? It was
It's a
designed-
very basic document that, and granted, it's almost like your rec
It's a
center.
little box.
It's a box with some basketball courts inside, it's not a middle school, right? So they put it out for design and build, so whoever bids on it is bidding on the design and the construction. So totally different than.
So you could add
We
the
did have
skip, I'm sorry, sir.
He's from Lincoln, so.
Yeah, so we did have a schematic design in advance, it was done by a different architect.
Right, and that's what we were talking about, is have the schematic design
And
done.
we had an OBM in place.
Right, I read it, cause it's Downs.
Right.
Yeah, I have the document that Larry sent me this morning, it was something
And that's what you're gonna ask, what, Kraus?
Rouse, yeah, I don't know, I don't know how we're moving.
That's where we.
Everything that,
Yeah, that's where we.
I'm sorry, I just didn't want you to get.
no,
hung
no,
up.
I appreciate it.
All of a
No,
sudden Rouse goes, I can't handle this, now we're back in the room.
right.
Correct.
No, so yeah, so you were saying add the RFQ process to the
Well,
motion.
not so much the RFQ. Yes, you could do that, or if you went back a step, you could add schematic phase to the design build. So if it never goes beyond schematic phase, all you've done is paid for that, and you don't
Right.
have the steps. I don't have the knowledge to put together that document.
Yeah, me either, that's right,
So-
that's where I was at.
Maybe your conversation with Rouse could also include, what would it take to do something like this?
Right.
He would know, because he has experience
fails, then you've got a mechanism to move on with us agreeing to put out your RFQ or RFP, whichever direction. Do we need to actually approve an RFQ or an RFP to go out? I mean,
I didn't think so, I
it's-
thought we
it's
could
not
just go out
dollar
anytime, and I have to
values.
bring it to you for approval to use that firm, said firm.
Yeah. So I guess you didn't
So,
really
and is,
need permission from us to do that.
okay, and in the town charter, does that, or I'm not speaking the right terms, I get, I don't know. Does that state I have to go out for RFQ or RFP for, professional services?
State
Because
law.
this,
That's
Situate and
what
Warwick, I never had to. It's state law said you didn't have to, it was town charter or city ordinance that said you had to.
It has something to do with the
Cause I,
professional.
we did it in one place, we did it in the other, but never, we were told we never had to, so I just, but I have an RFQ ready to go
Yeah.
for, we can just change the terms in there of what we are looking for, and that is schematic designs for this particular project, the North Kingstown School Department Middle School, I'm just throwing a name at it to put something on paper. But yeah, that's, I think that's the thing we should do, is get that ball rolling, get an OPM, RFP out, so RFQ, RFP, and then work from there.
So we design the architect for the schematics and the OPM.
Yep.
And that's all we do.
So RFQ to find architects that can potentially handle this project,
For the
right, so we're not
For the
hiring them yet,
schematic.
for the schematic
Right.
design portion of this.
And then the OPM,
And then the OPM is an
That's it.
RFP for an actual bid,
that's all we do.
yes.
And then the
It's just so many things that need to come together, my head's spinning.
And then the OPM may be able to also help guide us in the RFP process for the design build.
You're right, but that's what I would think, I think if we brought on a good OPM, they're gonna be able to, they do this every day, they're gonna be able to help us get to the point we need to be.
So what is, Jeannie, I'm gonna bother you again, what
That's
is the
okay.
motion on the
Yeah.
floor?
There is no.
There is no
Yes.
motion?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, there
There
is.
is.
He had an RFQ for the whole project, design and build.
That, I think that's the,
That's what Don.
I think that's what was said.
Correct.
Um, What's that?
I don't think that works. I don't think that's what we're saying.
It should be withdrawn.
So it should either be withdrawn or we should take a vote and
Vote it down.
vote it down, if that's not what we wish.
It's up to the motioner.
No, the
Correct.
person made the motion can withdraw the
We can withdraw it if he wishes.
That's exactly right.
Do you wish to withdraw your motion?
I do.
Is that enough?
Sounds like
That's
you're
okay.
married.
So-
You wanna make it formal?
So I'd like to make a motion that we do an RFP for an OPM.
Okay.
So,
Any discussion? Shall we call a vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Okay, so that passes unanimously. I'd like to make another motion that we do an RFQ for architectural services for a schematic design.
Second.
I think Mr. Case won that one.
Mhm.
Discussion?
I just think that'll be the opportunity to give Jim a chance, right? You can,
Yeah.
we're gonna do this,
Yeah.
Rouse can absolutely bid on this work,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Not bid,
So-
not bid, just submit
Submit
qualifications.
Right, submit qualifications, sorry.
Which is why it's an RFQ and not
That's
an
right,
RFP.
exactly.
Any further discussion? So let's call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Passes unanimously. I think that's,
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
I
Not debatable.
guess I still do have that
Well, and I
roof question, but
thought about it.
the
I think we
roofs.
need to have a
Do we talk about
discussion.
that?
I think we should bring that to a different meeting. I don't think we're at a point where
So that's gotta happen.
No.
So do we vote to adjourn? Well done.
Yeah, we technically have to vote.
So all those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
It's a very good one.
Thank you all.
No, it's not.